Good evening, everybody. It gives me immense pleasure to start the first day. Dheeraj, can you hear? Dheeraj, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
Dheeraj? Hello? Hello?
So you're audible, sir, now?
Okay. I can start, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It gives me immense pleasure to start the day one. In fact, it is day two. Yesterday was the inaugural session. Day two of the series, which we have started in Father Mullah's Homeopathic Medical College, the Provision. So we have got our alumni. It's basically a conglomeration of the senior physicians and also our alumni who have excelled in their profession, in their own field. So we have amidst us today Dr. Sanjay Panikar, the person who has started off his multi-speciality homeopathic clinic, that is Amrita Homeopathy Multi-Speciality Clinic at Bangalore, and is also involved in a good number of activities related to homeopathy. He'll be talking to us on types of hair loss progress and its management. I invite Dr. Shweta Bhatt to introduce Dr. Sanjay Panikar to this group.
Good evening, everyone. The speaker for today's session is Dr. Sanjay Panikar, who has 22 years of experience in the field of classical homeopathy. He has successfully treated more than 3 lakh patients in his practice. An alumnus of Father Mullah's, he is presently a senior consultant and a corporate trainer for homeopathic doctors. He has completed a thesis on homeopathic pediatric repertory and also specialized in dermatological cases, especially trichology. A well-known name in homeopathic community, he is a member of Indian Homeopathic Medical Association and regularly organizes seminars and training programs for the budding junior homeopaths. He has won many awards over the past years, to name a few: the Best Doctor Award, Successful Treatment Award, and Service Star Award. Soft-spoken and compassionate homeopath, his patient list comprises of celebrities from the film industries, directors, CEOs, and COOs of various companies, and also poor and suffering. He has successfully dealt with various complicated cases in his practice and has a deep insight into the concept of disease as well as the individual suffering. It's my privilege to extend hearty welcome to Dr. Sanjay Panikar. I would also like to welcome the moderators for today's session, Dr. Shivaprasad K, Principal and HOD of Father Mullah Homeopathic Medical College and HOD of Department of Organ of Medicine, and Dr. Kurian PJ, Associate Professor of Department of Repertory. I request Dr. Sanjay Panikar to take over the session.
Thank you, Shweta, for the lovely introduction. Thank you, sir, Dr. Shivaprasad, sir. You have been my guide during my internship. And also, I would like to convey my thanks to Dr. Srinath Rao, sir, who has also helped me a lot during my studies there in college. So today I would like to present before you a certain topic about hair, because after starting my practice in homeopathy, this is one segment which has found great requirement in a city like Bangalore. And it has been one of the main area on which the clinic patient base is based. So it has actually helped me to grow in my practice too. So I believe this could add value to the new doctors who are coming, especially for those who are practicing in metro cities. People have a lot of requirement for cosmetic and hair and skin related problems. So here today I will be sharing a PPT on how we will go about in the treatment of hair related disorders. Not actually the homeopathic part, but I would like to deal with the prognosis and the management of the different types of hair loss and how you can actually differentiate between them. Give me a minute, I'll just share the screen. Are you able to see the slide?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So basically hair loss, when we say commonly, I have had times when I used to practice before I actually knew so much about hair, where patients used to come and I used to see that they're totally bald, and then I used to send them back saying nothing can be done. But later I realized that that was basically a lot of things that I used to do earlier was because of my lack of knowledge. So I think having a little more idea about how we can diagnose and what we can do, what we cannot do, will give us some idea about how to deal with hair patients. So as far as the hair is concerned, we all know it's made of a protein, and it grows through the epidermis, and it is placed deep within the dermis. And usually it grows on the face, nose, ears, head, eyebrows, eyelashes, legs, and armpits, as well as the pubic region. Except palms and soles, it may not grow on the other areas. So keratin is a kind of a protein of which the hair is made of. If you look at the structure of the hair, then we can see that usually many patients come to me saying that I have lost the hair and there is the root also has come out now, whether my hair will grow back. So, but if you look at the structure of the hair has got a bulb. And after the bulb, you have the shaft coming up. Like you can see in this slide, you have the bulb, then you have the shaft, hair shaft, which protrudes out, and then it grows. Hair is connected with the erector pylori muscle, and then you have the sebaceous gland, which is very closely adjacent to the hair. Another common problem that patients complain is of dandruff and oily scalp. Actually, having an oily scalp is said to be a very positive thing, because when oil is secreted on the scalp, it actually nourishes the hair shaft, makes it more silky and makes it more healthier. So a little oily secretion of the scalp is essential. When we use too much shampoos to wash it off very frequently, the hair can become dry. Dandruff also can increase if we don't use the right kind of shampoos. So it's also essential to know what kind of shampoos you can tell to the patient, what kind of oils you can ask to apply, in what condition you need to apply, and how much time the patient can be able to apply this kind of oils and shampoos. So we know the structure of the hair has got basically a medulla, cortex, and a cuticle. I'm not going too much into the structure because practically that may not be of much utility to us. It is a well-known fact nowadays. Most of the trichologists accept that emotional stress also is one of the reasons why people lose hair. Like they say that even verbal abuse is one of the contributing factor towards hair loss. So now trichologists are also looking into that. Earlier, they didn't have much concern about it. And directly, they were using minoxidil, which is an allopathic medicine, along with finasteride. Finasteride is a medicine used to suppress testosterone levels. And so that also helps to promote the growth. So dandruff, as I told you, is excessive shedding of dead skin. When skin becomes very dry, that is when this particular issue happens. As it is normal for skin cells to dry and flake off, a small amount of flaking is normal. But when it becomes excessive, that's when the problem comes up. Many patients come to us during two seasons. One is the rainy season and the other is the winter, when the skin becomes dry and flaking happens. And when you see dandruff on the scalp, it's essential to diagnose what type of dandruff it is, whether it is normal or whether it is a disease condition. So basically, there are three major types of conditions of dandruff which can be diseased, like for example, seborrheic dermatitis, sebo-psoriasis, and psoriasis. Sebo-psoriasis is a condition between seborrheic dermatitis and psoriasis. So something intermediate. How we diagnose is when we look through a lamp with UV called as a ultraviolet lamp. When we look through that light through a lens, you can actually see golden yellow flakes of the particular dandruff flakes on the scalp in cases of seborrheic dermatitis where sebum is there. It is due to that Pityrosporum or Malvasia furfur, which is the organism responsible for seborrheic dermatitis. It takes in that UV light and then reflects it in a golden yellow color. So there you know that, okay, this is seborrheic dermatitis. And seborrheic dermatitis is commonly seen in certain seborrheic areas where sebum is produced. Seborrheic areas are the upper part of the eyebrows, the inside of the ears, behind the ears, and these areas of the nasolabial fold. Then you have the backside of the neck, the upper part of the chest, outer part of the arms, and upper part of the back. These are the seborrheic areas, including the scalp also. Now, when you find these yellow flakes are intermingled with a little bit of whitish flakes, that is called as sebo-psoriasis. And when it is pure whitish flakes, then you can say it is psoriasis. So that's an easy way to diagnose between sebo-psoriasis, seborrheic dermatitis, and psoriasis. So the instrument used is called as Wood's lamp. So based on hair texture also, hair can be qualified as fine, medium, or coarse, or wiry, or frizzy. Within these 5 texture ranges, hair can also be thin, medium, thick density, straight, and curly, kinky, that is tightly coiled, or wavy type of hair. Oil secreted on the shaft of the hair is responsible for the texture of the hair, as I told you. So these are fine hair or thin hair, as you can see there. You can see the wavy hair, the medium type of hair. And you can see the coarse hair. Sometimes by the texture itself, you can tell what type of underlying cause is there for the patient. Now, if you see a hair like what you're seeing in this picture, you know it's quite frizzy. And this kind of hair is usually seen in hypothyroid patients who have a thyroid issue where the hair becomes very dry and frizzy. It can also be seen because of excessive use of very harsh shampoos or using too much of blow dryers. The hair becomes very rough and can split easily also. This is usually not seen unless it is cosmetically done in India, but otherwise usually seen in the African race, the wiry hair and the curly or kinky hair, tightly coiled hair. Gray hair is one of the major problems which people come to us with, and they ask you, why am I getting gray hair so early? So the usual answer that we give is that nowadays everybody is getting gray hair. but the reason is that this is a result of oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is a condition which we all undergo because of our lifestyle nowadays, because of our diet and lifestyle, which promotes the secretion of hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is secreted on the scalp, very adjacent to the sebaceous glands, and this makes the hair gray. And it was a study was done in London, where they have seen that hydrogen peroxide is not secreted by the armpit hair. So the armpit hair usually never grows gray. And whereas the scalp hair, the facial hair and all can start growing gray, but the armpit hair doesn't grow gray. So they have started doing a research to see how they can implant those kind of follicles onto the scalp. Generally 75 years and above is supposed to be graying, but nowadays we see in 25, 15 and 30-year-old people also. Hair grows on an average of about 0.5 to 1 centimeter. A lot of women come to me saying that I'm losing hair so much in bunches and bunches, and when will I improve? When will my hair volume improve? So it is important to explain to them certain facts about hair and how your hair is going to improve and what is the growth rate of the hair. Because in women, even if the hair is growing back for what they're losing, it grows, let us say, half a centimeter or say 1 centimeter every month. If to grow 12 centimeters, it is going to take 12 months. That's almost a year. So if it has to grow in 2 years, it may grow, up to the back. So that's a very long period. And so women often notice that because they're losing a lot of hair, the plait volume keeps going down. So they will complain to you that the clip is getting loose, the hairband is getting loose, and your treatment is not actually helping. So these are practical issues that we face during the treatment. Even if your medicine is working, and even if the hair is getting replaced with better hair or with whatever type the regrowth is happening, the patient may not experience it if the hair loss is still continuing. Losing 50 to 100 hair strands per day is considered to be normal. And many people do not know this, especially patients do not know this. And so they get so worried about it. Hair grows faster in warmer weather. And this season, actually rainy season and winter season, a lot of people lose a lot of hair. And that will make them very worried. Cutting the hair or shaving off the hair is not going to make a difference in the growth rate of the hair. It has got nothing to do. It's a myth to say that it grows better. On an average, the top of the scalp has got about 1 lakh to 1,50,000 hair strands. Leaving alone this backside of the hair, the crown area has got about 1 lakh to 1,50,000 hair strands. So suppose a patient is losing about 100 hair per day. In 30 days, he will lose about 3,000 hair. And in 10 months, he will lose about 30,000 hair. So at that rate, if he's going to lose hair, then in 50 months, that is about 4 to 5 years, he will be totally bald, isn't it? That is, he would go bald step by step, and in 4 or 5 years, he'll be totally bald. But that does not happen for people who are losing a lot of hair also, because a certain amount of compensation always happens. And homeopathic medicines, especially the constitutional approach, helps to improve the hair volume. So hair actually starts growing from the hair follicle, as we know. So as you know that hormonal changes, oxidative stress, and diet, and the age are the factors which will govern the hair, condition of the hair on the scalp. Pollution is another factor. Usually healthy hair becomes finer hair. Activity within the hair stops completely. Finally, it leads to loss of hair density. So as you know, there are 3 phases in the life of the hair. Anagen phase, which is the growth phase. Catagen phase is the maintenance phase, where the hair is neither growing nor falling. And the telogen phase is a phase when the hair is shed off. These are the 3 phases. anagen phase or the growing phase lasts for 3 to 7 years. So you know that a lot of girls, many, especially people coming from Kerala, have very long hair. So the reason is they have very long anagen phase. That is, some of the women have hair keeping on growing for almost 7 years, 8 years, and so their hair keeps growing longer. Whereas some people have a short anagen phase, which will last for only 2 or 3 years. So that's why they don't have very long hair. They have hair only which is growing up to the shoulder or maybe lesser. So many girls do come to me saying that my hair is not growing longer. So there's nothing much. It is genetically predetermined. So you cannot grow much the hair length, but you can improve the hair volume. So it's essential to know that. Hair grows regularly, approximately 1 centimeter per month. And keratinocytes are produced in the matrix and push the older hairs out. So this part of it, I will take you through a small video so it will become easier for you to understand. The resting phase lasts for about 3 to 4 weeks, after which the hair starts falling, and it will last for about 3 to 4 months. That is a falling phase. So you will see a lot of people losing hair. When they start this hair loss, it will last for about 30 to 90 days. That is the falling phase. During that falling phase, especially in rainy season and winter season, people undergo severe shedding of hair, and that will last for about 30 to 90 days, after which it will anyway stabilize, unless they have a medical condition in the background. So I'll just take you through this video. Can you hear?
To understand how hair grows.
Yes, sir, we can hear.
Okay, you just go back to that.
To understand how hair grows, let's look at the different phases of the natural hair growth cycle. The cycle starts with the anagen or growing phase. A new wispy hair like baby hair emerges from the follicle and pushes out the old hair. Growth signals and nutrients start to enter the hair through the bloodstream, and a hair strand grows healthy and strong. The anagen phase can last between 2 and 7 years. This is when the hair is attached to the dermal papilla. The longer this phase lasts, the longer your hair will grow. As we get older, the anagen phase gets shorter, so hair may become thinner after each cycle. We then enter the catagen phase, which is the transitional stage that lasts about 10 days. This is when the hair detaches from the dermal papilla, which takes us into our telogen phase or resting stage. This phase lasts about 3 months, and as the old hair is no longer attached to its blood supply, it can't be repaired and can appear dull and lifeless. Another new wispy hair emerges from the follicle and pushes out the old hair, and the whole cycle starts again. Around 15% of your hairs are in the telogen phase. That's why you shed hairs all the time. Your head of hair is made up of about 150,000 follicles. Around 85% are in the anagen or growing phase at any one time, so it's normal to shed an average of 100 hairs per day. If, however, you're shedding more than 100 hairs a day, or if you notice your hair getting thinner and lifeless, it could be due to a number of factors, from poor diet and stress to age, hormonal changes, or medication, and you may wish to seek medical advice.
Okay. So this is one of the most common issue that we face, where patients come and tell, I'm losing hair in bunches. And if we don't know what exactly to explain, this patient may not stick on with you for too long. Especially those who are very anxious, they will quit the treatment after some time, and you will not be able to retain the patient with you. So if you know that, okay, this is how the cycle goes, and if you can make the patient understand what exactly is happening to the patient, his anxiety will be controlled. So usually, as far as the hair cycle is concerned, one individual to the next, there is a variation. It might be like each cycle may be varying from person to person based on various factors, like in age. In childhood, the cycle is little different. In puberty onwards, there is a growth rate decrease. because testosterone comes up, so the hair doesn't grow as fast as before. And Asians, blacks, and Caucasians don't have the same hair cycle. Anagen phase is longer in people of the Asian origin. So we are actually of the Asian origin, isn't it? So we have a longer hair phase, hair growth phase. Sex-wise, women have longer hairs, and androgen is a male hormone, testosterone, which is there both in men and women to some extent, makes the hair to reach its end of its life cycle very fast. Rainy season and winter season, as I told you, we have more hair shedding, and deficiencies can shorten the hair growth. There are multiple deficiencies, which I will come to it in brief later. So coming to the different types of hair loss can be diffuse, it can be patchy also. Diffuse hair loss can be non-scarring. Patchy hair loss can be scarring or non-scarring as such. So when it comes to diffuse non-scarring alopecia, involutional alopecia is one of the alopecia which happens. I will come to the details about it. There are different types. If you look at this, you can see the number of hair loss. This is very less. Actually, if you look at the entire literature, you got about 40 types of hair loss, but I cannot put down everything here. So I've taken only the main things. So I'll come to it one by one. Involutional alopecia is a natural condition. Here the hair grows thin with age. So I had a patient who came to me saying that, okay, I'm losing hair and I saw your program in some television, and so I want to join for a treatment because I feel you can help me out. So all this while I thought nothing can happen, but now I feel confident that you can probably help me. So he started a treatment with me at the age of about 38 or 39. And then we continued the medicine for some time. Let us say I took his treatment for about 1.5 to 2 years, during which period his condition actually improved in the first part of the treatment. And after stopping the treatment, after some time, he again noticed after 5 or 6 years, he came back to me saying that again, I'm thinning hair, and this time you restart my treatment. I restarted his treatment again, and the condition actually did not improve the way it improved when he was in his late 30s. So here, what has happened is an aging process which has caught up with this particular patient. So once involutional alopecia starts happening in the patient, and then there's a gradual thinning. What hair I have at 22 years or 20 years, I will not have when I'm 30 years, I'll not have when I'm 40 years, I'll not have when I'm 50 years. This is a natural thinning which happens with age, and that is exactly what was happening to the patient. But he wanted to go back to how he was when he was in his 20s, which is practically not possible. Involutional alopecia. So this is how the thinning would look, a diffuse kind of thinning across the scalp. Alopecia areata, as you know, is a patchy hair loss. That's again the most common type of hair loss for which a lot of patients do come to homeopathic doctors, which starts suddenly as a patchy hair loss, affects children and young adults. 90% of the people, the hair grows back within a few weeks. It initially appears gray and later it turns black depending upon the age of the patient. So many patients say my hair is growing, but it's all growing gray. So nothing to worry, it usually turns black later. But if the patient is on the elderly age group, then it may not grow black again. If left untreated, some of the cases can progress to complete loss of scalp hair, which is alopecia totalis, and complete loss of body hair, which is alopecia universalis. So we can see these alopecia areata patches, which can start spreading like the third picture which I put up. And in totalis, you have a loss like this. The complete scalp hair is lost, but the eyebrows you can see is intact. Eyelashes are intact. But in alopecia universalis, you have even the eyebrows and the eyelashes also may be lost. The complete body hair is also lost. The prognosis of alopecia totalis and universalis is not so good, though we can treat it with homeopathic medicines. I have patients who have recovered completely. But whenever you find any patient coming up with hair loss, never miss out thyroid. These kind of conditions, especially, there is usually a thyroid factor or diabetes in the background. Polycystic ovaries, another very common condition. Trichotillomania is a hair pulling disorder where usually comes in any age group, it can be there, but more commonly it is noticed in the school-going children or in adolescent age, where the parents come and say that the child is pulling the hair and that particular area is going bald. Usually the dominant side, like if it's right-handed, then right-handed side, and left-handed children, the left side goes bald. Even the eyebrow hair can go bald. Like I had one friend of mine who was coming to a tuition with me in school when I was in school, and he used to keep pulling his right side on this temple area and the whole thing had gone. And he used to pull it and put it in his mouth and chew it up and eat it. So this is also a very strong feature seen where they have an urge to pull that area because of the irritation, and then they get some kind of pleasure when they pull it out, and they also play with it or put it in the mouth. It's seen commonly in a lot of patients. The rituals that accompany hair pulling or patterns of hair pulling. Biting, chewing, or eating pulled out hair is again seen in this kind of patients. So you can see this is a typical picture of trichotillomania where you can see broken hair. So when you look through the Woods lamp, or now to examine hair, you have these video microscopes which you can connect to your laptop or your system and then examine the hair through that. You can see the broken shaft of hair. These are called, medically, in our studies, we usually study about exclamation hair. So that is seen in this condition. Exclamation hair means nothing but broken hair, which is seen as like an exclamation mark in the microscope. Telogen effluvium is a temporary hair loss. It's not going to last long, but patients panic when this happens. Patients panic. They come and tell you that, my God, I'm losing so much hair. I'm shedding hair in bunches. Please do something about it. So that is called as telogen effluvium. But the difference between telogen effluvium and the other type of hair loss called as androgenic alopecia, which is also a diffuse hair loss. How do we differentiate this? Is very simple. If you find the hair is lost all across the scalp, then it is androgenic alopecia. Whereas if hair is, all across the scalp, then it is telogen effluvium. Whereas if hair is lost only from the crown area and the temples and this occiput, in this area, the crown of the head, then that type of hair loss is called as androgenic alopecia. I'll come to it a little more in later. Now, telogen effluvium, you can see a large number of hair enter into the resting phase at the same time. It can be because of stress, shock, traumatic events like major illness, typhoid, malaria, jaundice, post-surgery, after vaccination, post-pregnancy, some antidepressants, antihypertensive, and oral contraceptives. A lot of patients on birth control pills, and also those who are taking treatment for infertility do come up with this particular condition called as telogen effluvium because they would be on some hormonal medication. Deficiencies of iron, zinc, B12, B6, crash dieting are the other factors which can cause hair loss. Anagen effluvium is a rapid hair loss resulting from medical treatments. It can happen very quickly and result in more drastic hair loss. Clumps of hair may fall out. These potent and fast-acting medication kill the cancer cells. Like you see, there's a lot of cancer patients who come up who are totally bald and they have lost hair. That is because these medicines shut down the hair follicle production in the scalp and other parts of the body. Chemotherapy and cytostatic drugs can cause this kind of condition called as anagen effluvium. So we often see it in a lot of cancer patients, isn't it? Tinea capitis. Here, ringworm or fungal infection of the scalp causes the hair to fall off in patches, circular patches, leading to bald spots that may get bigger over time. The affected area often looks red and scaly, and the scalp may be itchy. Sores or blisters that ooze pus can also develop on the scalp. We must have seen patches, fungal infection patches on the scalp. It's just like tinea on the body. Only thing, when it comes on the scalp, it is tinea capitis. When it comes on the body, it is tinea corporis. When the same tinea is there in the groin, it is called as tinea cruris. When the tinea is affecting the nails, it is called as tinea unguium. So when you find that the tinea is there on the scalp, check out his nails. Very often he would be scratching. It would also infect his nails. And then there would be also the nails having this kind of a fungal infection. So this is tinea capitis, blisters oozing pus, hair falls out in patches, and the area looking red and scaly. Lichen planopilaris. I had a patient like this who came to me when I just started my practice in the beginning, and I could not diagnose what it was. I started off the treatment and thinking it's a hair loss, and some different look was there of the scalp, and I didn't understand what exactly it was. After starting the treatment, the patient kept on saying every month after month, that he is getting worse, she's getting worse, she's getting worse. And then finally, after 6 months or a year, the patient was almost getting bald. And the worst part was, in this condition, there is scarring and it cannot regrow at all. And eventually the patient can sue you and take you to court. Somehow I managed to convince the patient and escape from that. Otherwise, it would have become a major legal issue. The way the patient was going to, create a problem with the kind of hair loss, because hair is so sensitive issue and it's going to affect their entire look, and it's going to affect their careers, it's going to affect their personal life. So it can spoil your reputation if you don't diagnose it right. So here in lichen plano, lichen is, lichen planus, right? So when lichen planus affects the scalp hair follicles, pilaris is the hair shafts or the follicles, then it can cause this condition. Here you will find a flaky rash appearing on the scalp, red, irritated, covered, small, white and red, itchy, painful, burning bumps, leading to permanent scarring of the scalp. So I'll share with you some of the pictures. You can see these kind of bumps of the hair follicles, which would have these red color bumps. And then you can see these kind of patches. What you see here is the scars which have formed because of the lichen planopilaris. So if you look closely, you can see a depression in the skin. The skin is not as the same color as what you would have in a patchy alopecia areata. You cannot see those dots or the small tiny hair follicles. You cannot see those dots, right? And you can see it's smooth, shiny, and it is little depressed from the surface at a lower level. So that shows the scarring. Whenever you find that, that means the hair will not grow back in that area. So you can see here in these two pictures, if you look closely, you can see a depression from the regular surface. That is a scarred area. And when you find there is scarring, please tell the patient that their hair cannot grow. Otherwise, he'll keep expecting the hair to grow there and he will get very disheartened or dissatisfied with your treatment. Discoid lupus erythematosus is another common condition which we encounter in homeopathic practice. So here you can see blistering lesions, thinning of the skin, lighter or darker skin pigmentation. Now, I think many of you must have seen discoid patches. Usually 20 to 40 years have a high risk. So this is how it will look, where you can see the skin becoming hypopigmented, or it can also be hyperpigmented, but it leads to scarring, and so the hair will never ever grow back in that particular scarred area. So there the roots are totally, it's a scar tissue. So in scar tissue, hair does not grow back. So folliculitis decalvans is an inflammatory disorder leading to destruction of the hair follicles. It is irreversible. Round or oval lesions of the scalp, red, swollen, itchy, containing pus around the hair follicles, that is perifollicular pustules, usually confined to the scalp. The characteristic feature is tufted like a toothbrush appearance. When I show you the picture, you can see that this is how folliculitis decalvans will look. You can see the tufted like a toothbrush appearance, right? So the hair is coming out from one point. A lot of hairs are coming out from one point, and there is little pus formation, and it's looking like a, the last picture you can see it looking somewhat like a toothbrush. Okay, this is folliculitis decalvans. So this is not tinea capitis. Very often doctors do misunderstand this to be tinea capitis. It is folliculitis decalvans. Even in tinea capitis, if the scar forms, it cannot grow back. Frontal fibrosing alopecia is another common condition where it's a form of lichen planopilaris, where the front area of the scalp, that is the forehead, closer to the forehead, just above the forehead, the area is lost and there is thinning. As in diffusely it will be lost. I'll show you the picture. Affects post-menopausal women. So this is how the frontal fibrosing alopecia looks like. So the name itself shows there is fibrosis, fibrosing, frontal, the frontal area, alopecia. So this is how it looks, and it is scarred, so it will not again grow back. So these kind of cases, you must know that you should tell the patient what to expect. Otherwise they get disheartened at the end of it. This is called as CCCA, central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia. So it's seen among African and American women. So we may not get too much of these kind of cases, but we do get in today's lifestyle where people use a lot of hair drying, hair dryers and heating, and the straightening procedures and all those cosmetic procedures, which involves heating of the hair, where the heat is transmitted and the hair follicles can get permanently destroyed. It might also be inherited in an autosomal dominant fashion, that these people are more prone to develop this kind of an issue. So you can see that is because of excessive procedures done on the scalp, which involves heating, though it might be autosomal dominant inherited. Hair shaft abnormalities are, yes, we do come across it, but it is too much in detail. I'm not going with hair shaft abnormalities because that many cases we don't come across. The most common thing that we come across is split ends, isn't it? Split end and brush-like ends in the opposition. That is, if you look at this chart, you can see hair shaft abnormalities. Either the hair breaks or it does not break. Either it is present since birth or it is acquired. And usually the acquired conditions is what we commonly come across. That is trichoptilosis, where the split ends are seen, and trichorexis nodosa, where brush-like ends in the opposition. This is what is two common conditions that we come across. We do not do a microscopic examination. Otherwise, if we do, then we can see bubble hair, that is air bubbles within the hair shaft. These three increases the fragility of the hair and can easily break. So there is another condition where I remember a patient coming to me and telling me that if I hold the split end and just pull it, it completely comes into two pieces. That was a lady. So she used to pull and show me that it is just becoming two pieces. This entire splitting of the hair shaft is called as pili bifurcati. Pili bifurcati or pili bifurcati. So this here the shaft is becoming two easily. Then you have a condition where multiple hair shafts are emanating from a single hair follicle, that is called as pili gemini. So these are all acquired conditions. These acquired conditions are very commonly seen, but the congenital conditions are less commonly seen, like you have uncombable hair syndrome. Longitudinal grooves are seen. This is seen in a microscopic check, so we don't have to worry much about it. Pili annulata, this is all less common. Woolly hair, and you have in these conditions fragility is not affected. In the conditions where fragility is affected and it is there since congenital, so there are 3-4 different types of hair shaft abnormalities which we don't encounter, so I'm not going into the details about it. Loose anagen syndrome present in young children where the hair that is not firmly rooted in the hair follicle can be pulled out easily. Hair falls out after it has reached a maximum length, and children with loose anagen hair syndrome cannot grow the hair beyond a relatively short length. Commonly affect girls with blonde or brown hair. So I'll show you how it looks like. Usually after puberty, this improves. Oh, I think the picture is not there. Okay, so that's actually short hair, very short hair that is seen. So maybe some other time I'll share the pictures. Traction alopecia is another condition which is very common in your practice, commonly seen in women who tie the hair tight, and so because of the traction the hair is lost in a particular pattern. And also in the Sardar community you find that they tie the hair in a particular fashion, because of which this area, the sides and certain areas are where the traction of the hair is more, because of the tight pulling and tying the hair is lost. Like you can see this, because they keep pulling the hair towards the back and combing, traction alopecia. So this is also traction alopecia pictures. So when you find a condition like this, it is very typical of traction alopecia. Hypotrichosis is a rare genetic condition. Very small hair grows on the scalp and the body, and it typically looks like this. Usually the person goes bald by the time he's 25 years. So it's a genetic condition, not very common. I had one African patient who had come to me like this, saying that the hair is going on reducing in its size. From childhood, they had very small, that lady had very small hair, but as she is about now 20s, she's finding it is very, very becoming smaller day by day. So that's a condition. Androgenic alopecia is the most common type of hair loss that we come across after alopecia areata, after telogen effluvium. Then we have androgenic alopecia, for which most people come to doctors and they ask you whether you can make me grow back my hair. So this is a common question of all androgenic alopecia patients, especially those who have undergone a lot of treatment, because they would see that they are not able to restore their hair at all despite all kind of efforts. And they would have actually lost hope. So it can affect both men and women. Receding hairline and gradual disappearance of hair from the crown and the frontal area of the scalp. Male pattern baldness in men and female pattern baldness in women. In men, the hair loss, that is how it is called. Hair loss as early as their teen and as early as 20s can happen. So I had a 15-year-old boy who came to me with this condition where he was receding hair from this side and it has gone quite deep. And he's also becoming thinner at just 15 years. But on inquiry, then we did all the tests and all, found out that he is hypothyroid too. That is why he has become predisposed to this kind of thinning at such a young age. So in women, usually it comes a little later, where this kind of thinning happens, where the androgen, here androgenic, that is the male hormone is causing this thinning. In the good years of women, they have these female hormones dominating, and hence they may not undergo much of this kind of a thinning until they develop PCOD or some thyroid issue or something. But over a period of time, especially post-menopausal, the androgen hormone domination starts off and this thinning starts happening. Male pattern of baldness happens like this, where your temples recedes and then the crown area gets affected. There are different stages like this. You can see that in the first stage, the sides are affected. Second stage, it's gone a little more deeper. As you can see in this picture, can you see here, the sides have gone a little more deeper, and it's gone a little more deeper here. And then you have the crown top part getting a patch, that is grade 4. When it becomes a little more bigger, grade 5, grade 6, and grade 7. So here in grade 5, after grade 5, if you take up the case and you say that you will grow back the hair, then it will be a disaster. We will usually not be able to grow back the hair in grade 6 and grade 7 to a satisfactory level in patients. You can improve the condition in grade 4 and grade 5 to some extent, but once it touches grade 6 and grade 7, then it becomes very difficult for the patient to restore back their hair. Female pattern of baldness is what happens in women because of this androgen, where the partition keeps getting wider and wider. And there are different stages like this in women, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 and 8. So in all these stages, if you look, usually a patient deteriorates 1 grade every year. So when a patient says that I'm losing 100 hairs every day, then he should lose, as I said, 30,000 hairs every month. So if he loses 30,000 hair, he should move to the next grade. So at that rate, in 4 or 5 years, they will go totally bald, which does not happen in a lot of patients. So if you know this, then you will not feel worried when the patient complains, because everybody only sees the hair which is falling. Nobody can see the hair which is growing back on the scalp. So people get worried because of that. So when you find excessive hair loss, the hairline is receding and there is thinning, bald patch on top of the head in men. And when you find the partition is getting wider, you know this is possibly androgenic alopecia. Okay. So here what is happening, DHT, dihydroxytestosterone, is a derivative of male hormone testosterone. It blocks the root of the hair. So the nutrition what is supposed to reach the hair does not reach the hair. So here the skin is becoming sensitive to testosterone. It's not testosterone is going higher. In most of the cases, it's not testosterone which is the problem, but it is sensitivity of the skin to testosterone. When your skin is more sensitive due to whatever reasons, then testosterone blocks the nutrition, and so the hair starts undergoing a progressive thinning, intermediate hair, and then finally you can see the hair undergoing this thinning process. Thinning of the hair is an aging is a sign of hair aging. Once the hair becomes totally aged, it turns vellus hair. So you see a lot of people going bald, but you can see on top of that tiny hairs are there. I remember when I first started my practice, I used to see those tiny hairs and hope that it would come back, but it would never come back. I tried various things like Jabarandi and Wiesbaden and all those things, but it would never come back. Then, you know, it's only when you go into the details of the medical literature and you know what is actually reversible, what is not reversible. So in medical science, aging can be improved, but it cannot be reversed. So this thinning is an aging process. So it cannot be reversed 100%, but it can be improved to an extent. So this part of it, we have already discussed about the stages of the hair cycle. Various triggering factors are there which can make your skin sensitive to testosterone. The genetic factors, hormonal factors like thyroid and diabetes, which is very, very common, stress, change of water, bad management of the hair, cosmetic treatment, liver problem, after illness, and medicine induced. In women, you have PCOD also in the hormonal factors, and even oral contraceptive pills, which can be one of the triggering factors for making your skin very sensitive. Many patients come after using a lot of cosmetic products, and then this problem has started. In such patients, we'll have to first modify their what they are applying on the scalp. We'll have to look, and we have to modify their external usage of cosmetic products. And liver conditions also can cause hair thinning. Diabetes can cause hair thinning. So these things we should be aware about, and then we should tackle it accordingly. Losing 50 to 100 hairs, as I said, is perfectly normal, provided you grow it back. So you can see in a microscopic check, we will find this kind of a picture where you can see very thick hair. You will see also very thin hair, and you will be able to also see some hair which is in the process of thinning, like this hair are in the process of thinning. They are not as thick as this hair, but they're not as thin as this hair also. So it's in between. So there are three types of hair: very thick hair, very thin hair, and the intermediate hair. So it's only the intermediate hair that we can restore back to the original thickness, but the very thin hair, we may not be able to restore it back. What you're seeing in this microscope as very thin hair is actually the kind of hair that you see in the body, which you will not even be able to see with your naked eye, but you can see with a microscope. Such tiny hair is the vellus hair. Maybe you will see, but it will be very, very tiny. So once the root is dead, that is the hair follicle is dead, and that area is completely become smooth, we cannot expect it to grow back. So in patients who are in grade 6 and grade 7, a lot of hair follicles would have died. So we cannot improve it. Temples, the testosterone action is very strong in the temples. So despite starting treatment, the sides will recede back by about 1 centimeter or so. That is inevitable. 90 to 95% of the hair you may be able to save, but 5% of the hair thinning is inevitable in patients who have started a treatment. This is essential to be explained to the patient. If we don't explain this to the patient will keep taking photos of the side of the head, and he will come and show you, see, I was like this, now I am like this. You have lost 1 centimeter. Your treatment has not helped me. So it is important to take photographs at the time when you start a treatment in hair patients, and then you must also explain to them what to expect despite starting treatment. Within 3 to 6 months, the body develops the ability to grow back hair which is being lost, and the hair loss comes within the normal range. So once we start a treatment, usually the patients undergo this kind of a graph where you can see that the patient actually deteriorates if left untreated. But if you treat it with homeopathy, then you can see within about 3 months to maximum of about 6 months, you can stabilize. Patient to patient variation is there. Within 3 months to average about 6 months, we can stabilize the condition. Within 6 to 10 months, usually 12 months or so, we can balance and see that it doesn't further deteriorate. And usually as the patient continues between 18 to 24 months, I have noticed that the patients have slight improvement and they get back to where they started, or maybe slightly better than that, but the temples never improve. Very rarely the temples improve. That is, if I see 100 cases, maybe some 2 or 3 patients may actually improve in the temples, but most of them in the crown area that may improve to some extent. So I usually put the patient on medicine for at least 1 to 2 years if they are looking for slight changes in the hair volume. But you cannot expect too much, maybe 5-10% difference at the end of 2 years. Earlier days, I used to treat them for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and some people used to say, I have 2 more hair left here. Can you treat me for the remaining till at least this I don't want to lose? So that was the kind of attachment they had to hair. So it is very essential that you know what to tell the patient and what to explain to the patient and what the patient should actually expect with the treatment. So usually by 12 months or 18 months, we find the patient is 5 to 10% less than when they started, especially in the temples, but later they come back and improve to some extent. Though there are exceptions, we have cases which have improved within 3 to 6 months also, and the volume has picked up. But if you see the statistics, the percentage of patients who have improved like that may be about 5-10%. So to avoid this kind of deterioration, nowadays we do certain techniques in the clinic where the patient is given a procedure called as mesotherapy, where the patient improves within 2.5 months itself. So the hair volume is restored within 2.5 months with this kind of procedures. So that is given in along with the medicine itself. What we do in this mesotherapy is we provide nutrition to the hair. These are high protein serums which are applied on the scalp, and we use a small instrument to massage the skin of the scalp. The pores open, the serum enters into the scalp, and through a process called as electroporation, and because of the nutrition which the hair is getting regularly, it is high protein serums, so automatically the hair becomes better in its volume. This is done every week for about 10 weeks. So these are certain procedures which we are doing along with the medicines so that the patients improve faster. So within 2.5 months, we restore this with this technique. But we also give the homeopathic medicine because in my experience, only homeopathic medicines can actually produce sustained changes. These kind of procedures can produce a drastic improvement within 2.5-3 months. But when you stop the procedure, again, nutrition is reduced. And so the patient may again start thinning out. So that can be a adjuvant or an additional support you might use in cases where they are losing hair drastically, but it cannot be a permanent solution like our homeopathic medicines. So homeopathic medicines, especially constitutional treatment, is what has given best results in androgenic alopecia. So every year the hair age is going to increase, and it's a huge challenge to arrest the hair alone from aging. The entire body is aging, but hair alone should not age. So that is a big challenge because you have to see that the patient doesn't deteriorate. Despite he's on medicines for 2 years or 3 years, he should not deteriorate. He should keep getting better, which is a big challenge. So we usually put the patient on medicine for at least 2 years, or sometimes even up to 3 years earlier days. Nowadays, we don't put so long. With these procedures coming up, patients improve in 2.5 months, and we stop their treatment after the hair volume picks up. In allopathy, usual medication is minoxidil and finasteride. So whenever you take up any case which has used minoxidil and finasteride, they would say that, okay, I have improved some extent initially, but right now I am not seeing much of change. It is not helping me, or I have been irregular, and so I have seen that again I'm losing a lot of hair. So when we see patients have used minoxidil and finasteride and the hair thinning is there, this case, you must deal with it very cautiously. You must tell them that sudden withdrawal of minoxidil and finasteride will cause withdrawal hair loss, where the patient will again deteriorate very rapidly. And you must also explain to them that if they go on using the same thing for a prolonged period, that side effects are there, like impotency, low sex drive, especially with finasteride. And you know that in pregnant women, even physical contact with finasteride tablets can cause deformed babies. So finasteride is not a very safe medicine. It is not at all advised, but many countries, they have even banned it, but in India, we're still using it. So what I think that we should explain to the patient these things, and you must also help them to withdraw this by supportive therapy with your homeopathic medicines. And if required, if you can incorporate other techniques like mesotherapy or platelet-rich plasma and these kind of techniques, then you can actually help the patient to recover without the side effects of minoxidil and finasteride. So in mesotherapy, we can improve the hair volume within 8 to 10 weeks. On stopping it, the hair loss happens in a few months. But if you have supported it with the homeopathic treatment, with your constitutional medicine, the withdrawal hair loss will not happen. So if you can do that in minoxidil patients, then it is excellent. But usually the withdrawal loss is so heavy that your medicines will not be able to produce that stability very fast. The side effect is so strong. So that's why it takes some time for us to withdraw it, support it with the medicines, and then gradually taper it down. In my experience, those patients who have come to me after minoxidil usage have always gone back feeling something unhappy with the results that homeopathic medicines or mesotherapy or anything has. many of the patients, like you can say at least 50% of the patients or 60% of the patients are not very happy with whatever treatment subsequently done if they have used minoxidil for prolonged periods. Stem cell therapy, not very effective. Success rate is only 56%. So I don't suggest that. Transplantation can be done, but in active cases, it cannot be done. Suppose they're progressively deteriorating and you do a transplant, many patients will come to you asking whether I should go for a transplant or not. So you don't suggest them a transplant if they're actively losing hair, that if you touch the hair and just give a pull and you're getting more than 5 hair strands, that means they're actively losing hair. This is called as a hair pull test. So if you do a hair pull test from the sides, and if you do a hair pull test from the crown, and in every area they're losing more than 5 hair strands, that means they're actually undergoing telogen effluvium. It's not androgenic alopecia. And in such condition, transplant is anyway not required. 30 to 90 days, usually acute telogen effluvium resolves. When it becomes chronic, that is more than 6 months duration, then it is a chronic telogen effluvium. There your constitutional medicine will help. No need of any transplantation. But and transplantation is again not recommended in a lot of those conditions like alopecia totalis and alopecia, because that is autoimmune where your immune system is doing damage. So transplantation, when they come and ask you whether I can go for a transplant, they need not go for a transplant if they're actively losing, because if you transplant hair between the existing hair undergoes a shock and they start falling more. And if you transplant hair in the empty areas, and this, suppose the temples are receding and you put the hair here, this area goes back, then you will have a gap between the existing hair and the transplanted hair that will look even more worse. So transplantation is not advised in active hair loss. Generally after 30 or 32 years, it is the condition usually stabilizes, and after that it is okay to go in for a transplant. And transplant ranges from 1 lakh to 1.5 lakh on an average in most places. Though there are some places which charge 2 lakh and 3 lakh also. It's based upon the follicles. 2 types of transplantation is there. A strip technique and a FUE. These are the 2 most common types. There are other types also, but these are the 2 most common types of transplantation. In that, I think strip technique is relatively giving good results. Though FUE, by certain doctors, when they do it, they are finding good results. Certain doctors are not getting that good results. It's important to know because you may need to guide your patient sometimes. Platelet-rich plasma is a technique where the blood is taken, it is centrifuged, 10 ml of blood or 20 ml of blood is taken from the patient. It is centrifuged in a machine. The platelets are extracted and this platelet is withdrawn with the syringe and then it is injected into the middle layer of the scalp. Once it is injected, these platelets contain factors which can promote the hair growth. So this is a particular technique which is done nowadays. It's very much in vogue. Even a lot of cosmetic centers are doing it and they're charging exorbitantly high, like one procedure will, like 10 procedures will cost about 1 lakh rupees or 1.5 lakh rupees. Every single procedure costing 15,000 rupees. So these procedures are very, very expensive if you go in the commercial market. Though if you look at it from the financial point of view, it may not be very costly to procure the PRP kits and all that, but they charge exorbitantly high. But personally, I don't recommend too much of PRP because the results are good initially, but again, they cannot sustain for too long. So I think homeopathic medicine is any which way is the best option. I'm telling you these treatment options because many patients will want to go to something else. So you should be able to tell them why this is not good and why your homeopathic medicine is much better than any of these techniques. And many patients do come and tell you that I will apply this hair oil or that hair oil. But we must explain to them that skin is waterproof. Actually, generally nothing enters into the skin and most of the hair oils don't permeate into the skin. So it may not produce the changes, though external applications like Jabarandi and certain other extracts are known to produce some changes, but it may not produce very, in all the cases, it may not produce that kind of a change. So I discussed with you diffuse patchy hair loss, diffuse and patchy hair loss. In the diffuse, the non-scarring variety, I have discussed involutional alopecia, androgenic alopecia, alopecia totalis, alopecia universalis, telogen effluvium, anagen effluvium, loose anagen syndrome, hypotrichosis, the genetic condition where the hair is short, hair shaft abnormalities I have discussed in brief, and patchy cicatricial alopecia, where it's trichotillomania, tinea capitis, where you can see it's patchy, and cicatricial. Cicatricial is where there is scarring. So trichotillomania has got scarring, tinea capitis has got scarring, lichen planopilaris has scarring, DLE has got scarring, traction alopecia has scarring, folliculitis decalvans has scarring. All these are the scarring types of alopecia. Patchy non-scarring alopecia is alopecia areata. So these are the different types of alopecia areata, and I have also told you where we can improve and where we cannot improve and what we should take care in patients. The most common cases of androgenic alopecia which come to us, I have a few pictures of the patients who have done these procedures called as mesotherapy. So you can see the kind of results that the patients are getting with mesotherapy. Here, a high protein serum is applied on the scalp and an instrument is used to massage the top of the scalp. You can see those intermediate hair, what you see as neither too thick, not too thin like what we have here, body hair kind of hair. This intermediate hair is growing thicker and longer. So, but this hair will not grow back. So here it is as it is. He actually came to me for a transplant in this area, but I refused him. I told him not to go for a transplant and to do just this and improve whatever existing hair he has, because he was actively losing hair. That every time I touch his scalp, I get 10-15 hair in my hand. So in hair patients, it's very essential to do a hair examination. So you need to get down to the patient and then, do a hair pull test, examine the texture of the hair, examine the scalp. If you don't do this physically, the patient will not feel satisfied. So this examination is very important. So you can see here, these are all cases where we have improved that intermediate hair has become thicker and longer. But it has to be supported with some homeopathic medicine if these effects have to last. So you can see this is a grade 4, grade 5 kind of condition where there are 8 grades in women. So this is grade 4, grade 5, somewhere in between. And you can see that they have improved one stage. So the temples are thinned out and we can see the temples are improving. This is alopecia areata, where you can see the patches getting covered. Commonly, we all come across alopecia areata. It's not very difficult to treat. It's one of the easiest conditions to treat. So thank you. I think I have finished on time. So this is in brief about the various types of hair loss and what we should expect and what we should tell the patient in brief about, how much they can improve, where they cannot improve. So if you have any questions, you can ask me and I can clarify that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have got some questions which are appeared in the chat box, which I think you can give your answers.
Yes, sure.
See, one of the questions asked from Lakshita is sebopsoriasis autoimmune?
Okay.
Is sebopsoriasis, yeah.
Yeah. See, actually here what is happening, lot of research was done on psoriasis, sebopsoriasis and seborrheic dermatitis. So if you look at it, seborrheic dermatitis is a condition where your immune system is not able to identify that particular organism called as Malvasia furfur, and this organism is growing on the scalp. So it's a problem where the immune system memory is not able to identify and attack the particular organism. As the condition progresses, this immune system memory can get worse and worse. And many patients in the initial stage are only in the stage of seborrheic dermatitis. Not all of them progress further, and most of them stay back in this condition called as seborrheic dermatitis. But as time passes, many of the patients start using chemical applications like ketoconazole based shampoos. Ketoconazole is a chemical which is used to kill this organism, ketoconazole. And over a period of time, they notice that ketoconazole is no longer working and they require something like coal tar based shampoos and all that. So the reason is, over a period of time, the immune system's memory to recognize the organism is anyway not there. It has started also wrongly thinking that your own skin is a bacteria. So there is a partial autoimmune change which is happening where your immune system is doing damage to your own skin cells. So the skin cells also start multiplying and scaling starts forming. So this condition, sebopsoriasis, there is sebum also is produced as an organism also which is growing. And also there is a damage happening from your own immune system also. So there is a dual damage. One is by the organism, one is by your own immune system. Both is injuring the skin cells. Skin cells are multiplying and forming the scales on the scalp. So this condition, which is intermediate between seborrheic dermatitis and psoriasis in its severity, is called as sebopsoriasis. And as the disease progresses further, the immune system keeps damaging, gets more and more problematic, and it can enter into the next phase where the patient is totally into the psoriasis kind of stage. This, I'm telling you, it's may not be, you may not find it in literature, but the researches which has been done say that the disease can progress from sebopsoriasis, seborrheic dermatitis to sebopsoriasis to psoriasis. And also, there can be independent cases of these three conditions, directly starting off as psoriasis, directly starting off as sebopsoriasis, or directly starting off as seborrheic dermatitis and remaining like that also.
Sanjay, one common question from most of the participants is common remedies for the hair fall, homeopathic management, and what are the common remedies what you have come across for the hair loss?
So in my experience, okay, this is Jaborandi and Wiesbaden are the most common which we all use, external applications, but it may not produce too much of change. When the patient is losing hair in bunches or in large quantities, that is when the patient panics, and that is when the doctor also feels scared whether this fellow will go bald and then he will catch your collar. So in such a condition, the most common medicine that helps is Carbovich, and you have this biochemic 5-phos and ferrum-phos which can also help. Then you have thallium, which is again a very good remedy which can help in this kind of severe hair loss.
Yeah, one more interesting question is, what is the role of miasms in the hair loss and the familial trend of having hair loss? What is your opinion and what is your experience?
Miasms, yeah, miasms, I have not actually probed too much into the miasms, though I have always gone in for a constitutional approach, and whatever based on the constitution only I have given. Of course, miasms do have a role to play, and most common miasm that comes up in androgenic alopecia is psychosis, and we find Thuja as the most common remedy, and Sabal ceruleta, both of which are known to have a DHT blocking effect. Also, if you look at the scientific part of it, allopathic doctors use Thuja and Sabal ceruleta to block DHT. They are known as DHT blockers. But homeopathically, when you look at it, this Thuja is especially an antipsychotic. And many patients with androgenic alopecia respond to Thuja when given as an intercurrent, especially in cases where Natramur has been given and where some natrum sulf has been given. Thuja can often help as a follow-well or as an intercurrent in helping these patients to come out of the situation. Otherwise, I think in all these conditions where there are skin problems associated, sulfur we can think of as helping. And if they have dandruff also, especially a lot of dandruff, sulfur is helping. Calisulf is also another remedy which can be used in this kind of dandruff-like conditions. Soranum, sulfur, these all remedies. There the psoric miasm may be coming in. But if you look at androgenic alopecia, which is the most common, I think Thuja can come in.
Yeah, one of the common measures they're asking is continuous or repeated hair washes. Does it have a role to play in hair loss or hair growth?
Okay, so hair wash repeated, many patients are very worried to wash their hair on a daily basis because they feel they'll go bald if they wash daily. This is true to an extent. If you're losing hair in bunches and you're washing hair on a daily basis without taking any measures to control that severe hair loss, then yes, it can happen. But otherwise, for a healthy person who's losing 50 to 100 hairs only per day, and if you're able to wash your hair on a daily basis, it's actually good. If your scalp is healthy, then it should not cause any problem. In fact, when you wash the hair, when you dry your hair with a towel, the circulation to the hair improves, and hence the nutrition what you're supposed to get should be better, and so the hair condition improves. I wash my hair on a daily basis since my childhood till date. So hair loss, I mean, washing daily should not be a problem for hair. That is not the thing. It's the scalp health which we have to improve. So if the scalp health is improved, you can wash it daily also.
In that respect, is there any role of the diet which you can prescribe for the hair growth? Diet, that's what one more question which has come. Yeah. Okay.
So diet is actually a lot of points are there in hair diet. Hair is a protein. So basic diet which is inclusive is a protein-rich diet. Soya, flax seeds. Flax seeds are again rich in omega-3 fatty acids. But when you advise soya, you must ensure that the patient is hypothyroid or not. If they're hypothyroid, then soya is generally not very good. Again, protein-rich food like your dry fruits, and you have got spinach. Your milk is good for your hair, and B-complex, folic acid containing food. These are all usually most of the patients, when they come in with a hair loss issue, you should send them for investigation. And what are the investigations that you will send them? You need to send them for deficiencies, and deficiencies like ferritin. Ferritin is the most common deficiency that the patient will have. And second thing is B12 levels, folic acid levels, vitamin D levels. So if these 3-4 things are checked out, you can screen out most of the deficiencies. Then you need to see the zinc deficiency and all, you're not going to screen out, but anyway, your most of the diet will contain something containing zinc. And if not, some supplements are there which will help the patient to improve the zinc levels also. So you will also need to send the patient for checking out if they have a thyroid issue, if they have, send them for an abdominal pelvic ultrasonography to see if they have cyst in the ovaries, rule out diabetes, rule out liver problems. So these are the most common things. Exceptionally, you may also need to send the patient for DHEAS in PCOD cases, or if they have a problem with the adrenals, then DHEAS, serum cortisol are the test, and free serum testosterone. If they are excessively losing hair in the temples, especially in women, then serum testosterone levels we should check. And if these problems are there, then they must be dealt with. As far as diet is concerned, I have a lot of details about it. Maybe I can send, you can just browse my website, Amrita Homeopathy. In the YouTube videos, you can see the diet. I have mentioned all the details about it.
Yeah, one question, last question. What is the role of shampoo? Shampoos.
Actually, yes, shampoo is basically discovered to wash the scalp. None of the shampoos can strengthen your hair. None of the shampoos can make the hair healthier, practically speaking, though it is commercially advertised and used. The excessive use of shampoo is anyway not good to the hair. Shampoos contain chemicals which can in the long run do damage to your hair. But at the same time, if you are in a place which is very dry, like where the pollution is very high, then shampoo usage is advised. Whereas if your scalp is very dry and oily, I mean a very dry kind of scalp, then too frequent usage of shampoo will make the scalp even more dry and dandruff will increase. If your scalp is oily, then you can wash your hair more frequently. This is how it's usually advised to the patient.
Wonderful, Dr. Sanjay, for sharing your wonderful experiences with us. I think most of the queries are answered because we have got good number of homeopathic medicines which are available in the market as shampoos also and hair nourishers also. So the public can make use of it and our doctors also can think about it and can go ahead with the therapy. So I request now Dr. Kurian to his comments on this today's session. Dr. Kurian. Dr. Dheeraj. Dr. Kurian.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Dheeraj, you can go
Kurian,
ahead.
is he online?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I think Dr. Kurian is not able to log in, I believe.
Yes, sir. So I request Dr. Shiv Prasad to deliver the vote of thanks, sir.
Yeah. I first of all, my impression on this particular session is a specialty concept coming up in cosmetology. I think Dr. Sanjay Panikkar has given a wonderful exposition and he has been with us as a student, now as a consultant. He has come over here and has given his expertise opinion. During this particular session, I also could find our administrator, Reverend Father Roshan Krasta, who was there with us the whole throughout the session. Because when I started off, I was not able to get on to all the screen members. When I did my welcome speech, I just gave a general introductory welcome. I saw Father amongst us and who has been a constant, support. Father, we are very happy that you are with us, trying to, get into the concepts about homeopathy. I thank you for your presence and making this whole session very, meaningful. And Dr. Sanjay, coming back to Dr. Sanjay, he has got his views, which are probably very, very practical. And the other components, when we had the questions from our good number of participants, they are the live questions which are there in front of us with the environment, with the stress, with the whatever we are talking about, the diet and regimen, everything for which homeopathy has got an answer. Dr. Sanjay also has given us an idea regarding the antimiasmatic remedy, constitutional remedy, and also the specifics as and when it is required we can use. He has given a exposition about the basic, the different components of the pathology which is involved with the hair and hair related diseases. So on behalf of the organizers, behalf of the Homeopathic Medical College management, director, administrator, and all the people who gathered, I thank you, Dr. Sanjay Panikkar, for your exposition on hair-related conditions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I thank all the committee members of the webinar who have done a great job in doing this process of webinar day 2. I thank Dr. Shweta Bhatt for her introduction and starting this program in a very good note. And I thank the administrator and members of the faculty for giving cooperation to organize this program. Thank you. And I thank all the participants who have made it possible to attend. We had a record number of 620 participants today. It was a good show. Trying to learn something more, trying to know something special is always the human tendency. And these are the opportunities given to all of us by a particular process called as provision, which gives us a chance to get to know something more. And you can also share during the question and answer hours. So please be with us in all these days and get enriched. Thank you. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Good night.
ഒരു മിനിറ്റ്.